Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, Rebecca.
Welcome, all of you. Thanks for coming tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces from our shared days at the Museum of Contemporary Art, where Maria and I overlapped for about 6 years. You were there and then worked as an editor for various publications. And I remember Maria was the one who first told me what a blog was. She said, "There's this new thing." So that dates us.
Yes.
But it was really a pleasure to read your book. I really loved it. There were so many amazing details that I think spoke about you and the place where we worked and the contemporary art world. And I was wondering if you would first start a little bit by talking about the title, which I think is so compelling.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the title came fairly early on. It is one of those titles where you wonder, I think, when you're reading it, is it still lives or is it still lives? But I was in a museum, I think it was the Cantor Art Museum at Stanford, and I was looking at a still life on the wall, and there was the wall text beside it, and it started talking about how still lifes were considered often appropriate kinds of painting for women to make. And I'm talking about back at the time when 19th century and earlier, when it wouldn't be appropriate for women to be necessarily painting somebody naked, standing in front of them or drawing from nude and so on. And that made still lifes also seen as kind of a lesser form, a feminine form and lesser form. And so, an artist like Cezanne actually had a lot of trouble with legitimacy at times in his career because of doing still lifes. Anyway, and so I was thinking about that. That was percolating in my head. And then I was also thinking about, at the time that I lived in LA, which was around 2001 to 2005, and then I moved to Northern California, there were a lot of murders of women that became high profile. Lacey Peterson and Chandra Levy, and I think the death of, even though this was prior, the death of Nicole Brown Simpson kind of hung over the city for quite a while. And I started just thinking, those thoughts started to sort of come together, that the way in which we, as a culture, kind of spectacularize the deaths of women, and almost take the death and the sort of interest in the sort of true crime aspects of the death, objectify the women and kind of take away their lives from them. And so what they become are objects of death in some ways, like, oh, this is what happened to the Black Dahlia's body. This is what happened to Nicole Brown Simpson, and not so much like who they were. And so I think those two things came together, and I don't know this really like the aha moment, but I thought of an artist who might address both of those, and she became the artist Kim Lord, who is the artist who's at the center, whose disappearance is at the center of the book.
I'm really interested in the way that you talk about Kim Lord and her artistic process, that she decides to dress up as these individuals who have been murdered, take photographs of herself, blow those up to a larger size, and then paint from them. I'm curious about your interest in moving from the photograph to the painting, why you decided not to keep the art objects as photographs, and what about that translation from photography to painting?
Yeah, well, two things happened to me while I was working at MoCA that I think influenced that. One was I saw the work of an artist named Amy Adler who does drawings from, or she does, let's see, I think photographs and then drawings from or paintings from the photographs. And that process just sort of lodged in my mind as interesting. And then also we had a show of Lucian Freud's paintings, and I went through the exhibition when it was like the opening or the press preview or something, and I was like, oh, it was pleasing or influencing, I guess, to me. But then I went down to the galleries at some point when there were no people around and went through, and I had this really painful experience of being shocked at, I guess, the paintings themselves seemed, the humanity in the paintings, the way that they leapt out at me, the way that he created the characters in paint was like nothing I had experienced before. Certainly not with photographs. I think there's something about photographs that stills the image, that makes it kind of flat and placid in a way that paint doesn't, even though I think photography can be very affecting. But there was just something about the sort of fleshiness of painting, I guess, and of paint that really appealed to me. And so I thought also that an artist of her generation would have some anxiety about just painting, like that there was sort of a, like painting's dead kind of vibe in the air, and so that to have a multi-layered process would make it more interesting for her, but also that would enable her to inhabit the selves without exploiting them quite in the same way that if she had just dressed up as them, she might have been seen to be sort of costuming herself.
Well, that certainly reminds me of Cindy Sherman.
Yeah.
And then taking it one step beyond. I worked on that Lucian Freud show.
Yeah.
And one of the main things is that he doesn't paint from photographs. He paints from life, where a lot of artists like Marlene Dumas paints from photographs. So you have that play also, where you're right, his work is really bodily, and you're getting that relationship between him and the sitter.
Yeah.
But that Kim Lord, and what you're saying, wants to, I think I wrote down a quote from the book where you say, I thought if I could slip inside the skin of a victim and emerge again, I might be able to explain why it happens. Wasn't that the reason Kim Lord made Still Lives? Mm-hmm. So that's a really curious idea. I wonder if you could talk about that, her interest in the event and embodying the victim and what that did for her kind of emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at least how I constructed it in my mind in the book, she goes into kind of a very private space to do that, where she's isolated from others. And I think that quote just has a lot to do with Maggie's the main character, and her growth in understanding and kind of confronting these issues in her life and in society, which is that Maggie also, she has reservations about the show when it starts. She's really jealous of Kim Lord because Kim Lord is dating her ex-boyfriend. She also thinks it seems kind of sensational and, what does this woman know about these lives? But Maggie herself has to kind of also go through this journey in the book of inhabiting the headspace of victimhood and of the terrible rupture that happens when people kill other people. And so what she's seeing in the artist is also her own journey, I think. Yeah.
Do you think Kim Lord is critical of representations of women, or how do you think she falls on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think insofar as that I think every artist, when they're making art, is trying to put into place something that they feel like has been underrepresented or overlooked, and so they want to I mean, part of the motivation to make things come into being, I think, is the sense that there's an absence there, that there's not, the way you want to do it isn't there yet, or the way that you personally see or hope to see isn't in existence yet. And so I think in that way, that would be a motivation for her. Yeah.
It seems like you and Maggie are related.
Yes. I'm just distressed how many people didn't like her. Or I think they like the parts of her that aren't like me, and so that was kind of distressing.
But there are some really interesting overlaps. But Maggie doesn't like the work, it seems like, and she wants to, and I don't know if it is that she doesn't like the work or she doesn't like what the artist represents, or maybe all of that together.
Yeah, at the beginning, but then I think by the end she feels differently. I mean, I don't know how you all feel when you go into a museum or pick up a book or even start listening to a piece of music. Sometimes there's part of you that's not ready or not. There's a refusal to engage with it that comes out of a lot of different places. And I think Maggie's came from, in a lot of ways, from personal jealousy and distrust. But, you think like the overhyped artist, how are you going to really relate to them? Or you think the artist who is dating your ex-boyfriend is perhaps somebody who's like the envy just gets in the way of or the anger or whatever feeling it is gets in the way of the emotion that you might have just directly relating to the work. But yeah, I think at the beginning she's definitely skeptical, and that was again like part of I wanted to start the book with the least likely person to find Kim Lord a genius to be the narrator and see if I could bend, over the course of the book to her seeing it. So
I remember when we worked together, we had a few conversations where you asked me very specific things about the art world and took a few notes at the time. And I was curious that as a writer, if you made many notes that you referred to during the writing of this book, or were they still fresh in your mind, in your relationship to the art world, still strong that you had it just in you to do? Or
yeah, some of it I think I just had in me. I mean, a lot of it was like the space of the museum really helps. MoCA has this tower where the offices are, and then it has the galleries, and then it has this subterranean area where there is this incredible vault of art, and it's like a flea market looks like in there, I know it's very carefully tended, but it's crazy, like, because it's just like it's there, like all of it, like all there, and then there's the rooms where people are building stuff, and just knowing those spaces, really, we did actually, Marcy, who's here, was a graphic designer on the creative services team with me, and we did like this behind the scenes issue of the members magazine, and so we were able to go and talk to a lot of people about their jobs, and that really helped me frame the narrative, because I think when you know spaces in which you can create scenes, it helps with the creation of the scenes, especially because they're interesting. Like, I don't know, until I worked at MoCA, I didn't know about those rooms, like I only knew about the gallery, really, and not all these other, and in each of those rooms, and this was kind of a motivating factor for writing a mystery or a thriller type book, were people who had really different passionate agendas about art, right? Yes. Andrea was in the education department. And so it's like, that's perfect for that kind of a book, because it's like, who's done what? Well, there's so many motivations to tap into. Like, this person can't stand that the, museum is becoming commercialized, and this person can't stand this person, so that, creates tension, and and this person hates their job for certain reasons, or whatever it is. So that was really influential. But I guess the research I felt like I had to do that I didn't know that much of from working at MoCA was the economics of the art world, and it still puzzles me even after reading a lot about it, like value, right? like why certain things have such high value in contemporary art
Sure.
and others don't? What do you think?
It's unanswerable. It's the kind of thing, something is valued at whatever somebody will pay for it. But it's true that the fluctuation is common and you never really know. But I know you talk a little bit about the super collector and also the fact that Kim Lord gets this choice spot on the exhibition schedule through a donation of $2 million. And that's a very direct relationship that you set up. It's like a board member gives money for this work to be on view at the museum so that the value of their collection increases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little crooked. You're like that. Yeah. And I mean, nowhere, I don't know, I'm sure it's like this in New York, but LA has people with such economic power. You know, I mean, just so much money to throw at investments. Do you think it's more so even now? I mean, like, I know the wet paint kind of commodity, that's what at least this economist who wrote this book about the art world that I was reading called the Something $1 Million Shark. That's based on the Damien Hirst formaldehyde shark thing. But he talks about the wet paint market a lot and this was like a book that came out in maybe 2009. Do you think it's still?
I mean, I think that all of these these not-for-profit institutions are all vying for the same dollars, and it is incredibly competitive. But it is very unclear. It is purposefully opaque. And I think that our world is generally like that. You go into a gallery, you don't quite know how much things cost, they're supposed to actually have it on a piece of paper because they are a store and they are selling these things, but so many people don't. And
they might be choosing who they're selling it
absolutely,
to.
and telling you that if you want to buy this, you have to buy this first. And it's very flexible, fluid.
Yeah. Which is, I don't know. I mean, I
don't think there's anything quite like it.
Yeah. I don't either, because books are pretty straightforward by comparison. Record deals, I think, same. They don't really have them anymore.
Movies,
yeah. But art is so much relationship bound. Yeah. Well, I thought that was interesting, and I was like, I could exploit that for a plot. Yeah. With no cost to myself, which is the good part of it. Yeah. So I have a question for you because I feel like, I was at MoCA about 2001 to 2005, and some of the things that one of the things that was kind of going on then too, which is in Still Lives, and actually it's more in the next book I'm writing, is this debate over the purpose of the museum and whether it is like you try to get everybody there and then you give them the art, versus it's sort of the destination kind of idea versus like it's the cathedral, the preservation, the context maker, but you're not going to bring in the motorcycle in. And do an art of the motorcycle show or something like that. So what do you think? Like, where is that now?
I mean, I think that that's twofold, that a lot of people are looking at artwork digitally, but that doesn't match the experience of seeing something in person.
Yeah.
And where are you going to do that? I mean, people buy work, they bring it into their homes, and then unless you have access to their home, you're not going to be able to see that work. Certainly the gallery, but I really feel like the museum still is the place for people to come and have an experience with artwork, which is powerful and meaningful, and I believe in that as something that we should all partake in because it changes our lives and the way that we think about humanity. Different museums deal with the rest of it differently. It kind of depends on the purpose of the institution, but certainly the other half is preserving the work for generations to come and making it accessible at any cost, really.
Okay.
And that's a huge endeavor.
Right.
I mean, that's staff and money and architecture and everything.
Right.
But I think that many institutions are still very much devoted to that.
Right. But the future thinking could include being financially viable, therefore you have to do certain things to make sure you're getting a lot of selling a lot of tickets or getting a lot of donors.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't be purist entire.
Oh, do we have to give over to the wants of others in order to receive
Yeah.
the funds to do the things?
I don't mean
I
like.
work at a county museum,
Right.
and I feel like that is different from a private institution, very much so.
Yeah.
We are actually very transparent as a result, and I've worked at two different kinds, and I can see the difference. And I think also that means that we are open for everybody also. But yeah, I mean, I think that smaller private museums do struggle to stay afloat, and they do end up being about individuals often, because those are the people who can help support them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another, just sort of, this is slightly switching gears, but I was also curious about this question that you kind of started out with. In your own work as a curator of photography, like, how much does representation of women matter? You know, how much is that part of your thinking when you're thinking about how the, you know, what the museum's showing, what you're collecting, what you're preserving?
Well, this year we decided to acquire. We have a group that we make acquisitions through, and we decided to acquire only work by women.
Oh, wow.
And we felt like that would help change the balance a little bit. And actually, all of our acquisition groups at the museum did that as well. And I think that that's not hard to do here. There's so many amazing women making artwork. It wasn't like, oh, got to find them. I don't know where they are. It's like they're, you know, it's really a world in which both exist equally, men and women making great work. So I try to strike a balance, but I don't go for one or the other either. I think that balance is what's key. And I mean, in contemporary art, I think that kind of that conversation about representation has changed a little bit, and women are photographing themselves mostly, rather than kind of what was traditionally thought of as like they were perceived by the male gaze.
Right.
That seems passe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Do you all have any questions? Would you like, I mean, we were going to kind of go back and forth, but we can kind of broaden it out. There's so many interesting people here, so I feel like we should include you. Yes.
So I have two questions, actually. When you started thinking about the book, did you always know that Kim was going to die? Because I know you kind of...
Oh, spoiler. Well... There's probably a few, but that's okay. Or not die. Right. And get resurrected.
Okay, you don't have to answer that. But then my second question is kind of personal. Who did you model Evie after?
Oh my God, I can't
You don't have to answer that either.
say. She's a composite. She is definitely a composite of a few people. Yeah, I might not get too deep into that one either. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, as you're like true crime, we're in such a true crime moment where
Yes.
the genre is like incredibly popular.
Yes. The
And
podcasts
I'm
are.
curious, as you were writing this book, if you thought about like why you think true crime is so popular, and then also, interestingly, it feels like there's a genre that's like really popular with female audiences too.
Right.
And in Maggie's journey throughout the book, there's like she's invested in figuring out what happened to Kim Lord because of her ex-boyfriend, but there's also like an element, at least when I was reading it, of like wanting a little bit more oomph in her life, like excitement and adventure.
Yeah.
And that tension was like really interesting to me.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, like true crime, women.
Right. I mean, I think this may be my sort of personally personal experience might be dictating my answer somewhat to this. I think true crime is having a lot of, true crime podcasts are really getting, I don't know if anyone listens to My Favorite Murder, or there's just so many podcasts that are true crime. And I think true crime lends itself really well to podcasts because having multiple voices and multiple kind of perspectives, especially on an event that at its core has something mysterious to it, like the Hart family. I don't know if anybody's listened to Broken Hearts, but about the white lesbian couple that adopted, I think it was 6 African-American kids and then drove them off a cliff in Mendocino.
Yeah.
It's like a very difficult, like at its core, there's so much that people don't understand, like why this happened and why the system failed, these children and everything. And so it really lends itself, I think, well to serial, multi-voiced narratives. And I think that's creating a kind of another layer. I mean, we've always had the Datelines and the, like the TV specials on true crime, but now we have this other art form. I think that podcasts are really becoming an art form that's interesting. And so there's like, and these stories are getting recycled again, in another way. So if part of it, I do think, is the diversifying of platforms. Everybody's looking for content right now. TV's looking for content. The media, new media kind of world is looking for content, and crime always sells. So I think we feel like we have more, partly because there's just more ways that people are consuming it. I don't know. I mean, so I think, could there be something about our political moment too? Maybe. I'm not sure I have any formulated thoughts on that. Do you?
Do I? Well, I think actually I would link it a little bit to Los Angeles in particular in the book, and maybe that makes me want to go a little bit into how that seems to be a really important character for you.
Oh yeah.
And and it's more than just a backdrop, kind of a backdrop to crime, but maybe you could talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I mean, I think LA, because LA is the creator of our, mirror, right? It's the mirror that in LA, so much of the mirror to our culture is created in terms of visual culture. And I don't think there's like LA doesn't have like a homicide rate that's necessarily especially higher than, I don't think, than other cities. I don't know. Dan, do you know? You did it. No. Yeah, there's a lot of murder, and there's a lot of high-profile murder, and there's a lot of the narrative of the person who comes to LA for some kind of dream and gets murdered, which I think it just feeds into the mirror issue. Because You did? Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think that the LA... And of course, I think it's important to say at this juncture too that the high-profile cases always tend to be white, and there are murders that happen routinely in the city that don't get any media attention at all. There's the homicide report and stuff, but there's not a spectacle about it. And why is it that these murders are spectacle and others are just, people don't want to pay attention to it? Others are just a problem or something. Some are a spectacle, some are a problem. Like, there's something wrong there. I feel like we've drifted really far from your question. I don't know does anybody have thoughts on like the true crime moment? I think it's an interesting question. Because I think a lot of writers are picking up on it. Yeah.
So I'm really interested in these couple crimes. They have the anathema to divorce, and they want to murder the spouse, and it's usually high-income murder.
Yeah, right. Like poisonings and stuff.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking, can you get me a mindset? So when it's all done, which is impossible now with all the cameras and everything, I was just
not being able to perceive the aftermath. Yeah, it's true. I don't, either that or they're psychopaths. And so that like emotion isn't really on their wavelength. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that creates, I mean, there's two reasons why I think there's perennial interest in mystery. One is we don't understand why people die, but we really don't understand why people, I mean, we understand why people die because your body gets old or has a heart attack or something, but like death is still a perennial mystery to us. Like, why does life have death? And then murder is like the most incomprehensible version of that. Why would someone try to take this from someone else, take their life? But then mystery writing is rational, right? It's all about the art of deduction and sort of figuring things out. And so there's a way in which there's like the satisfaction that happens at the same time the mystery exists. So in the form, both a satisfying experiment happens at the same time you're addressing questions that can't be answered. And so I think people gravitate towards that over and over again.
Maggie's naturally very good at that. She sort of has a journalist background and is precise.
Yeah.
And can go at the problem.
Yeah, I think she gets better. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering, in the writing of the novel, how did the mystery unfold for you as a writer? How clear were you as to where you were headed, and how plotted and structured was it? Or
Yeah.
how much of them, like, it's tough to write a mystery in an organic fashion, but...
Yeah, I have written novels in organic fashions, and this one I could not do that way. I had what I considered sort of dreaming in notebooks time for about 2-3 months before, where I was like working out the problems of the plot and really creating a map. I mean, definitely writing out the murder scene, even though that doesn't, God, sorry, it's like so many spoilers, but none of this appears in the book, but like it appears as things you find out. But anyway, like really working all that out so that I could plant the red herrings and plant the clues. I don't think I could have done it personally any other way. I know people can, but I really had to work backwards from an architecture that I created. But it was really fun, too. I mean, the process of saying, okay, and this what made me feel a bit more like an artist, too, in the sense that I was just sketching, like it was really creating sketches in the notebook, and they're very messy and unappealing to look at, but it helped me a lot to do that first. Yeah. So that was, Marcy. Yeah, I did. Definitely. There were a few that were pretty helpful. And I think I didn't like mysteries for a long time, actually, as a reader because of the rational part. I'm not very rational, I think, sometimes. But I began to, there's certain writers like Tana French and Kate Atkinson and a couple others that I felt like, what I really like about these books is how they enable the author to talk about, like, Tana French's are often about changing Ireland and, like, the gentrification of Ireland and stuff like that. And there's this, like, real backdrop of what's happening in Ireland and the economic boom and everything. And I thought, if I want to, had always wanted to talk about my experience at MoCA or the sort of LA art world experience. And I was like, this would be a great way to do it, which is, so I enjoy that part of it, is the sort of counterpoint structure of the mystery where there's the thing that keeps you, the suspense that keeps you reading, but then also there's the commentary can be part of it too. So. Yeah, maybe.
Would you say it's the way women write mysteries?
I don't know.
I'm just wondering the difference between women's
Well, there's so many different kinds of mysteries, too. There's like the cozy mystery and the procedural and the, I don't know. I don't think that necessarily it's a male-female thing, but I do think women are claiming the investigator role in interesting ways right now, creating investigators that are maybe ones that we haven't seen quite their like before, and that's exciting. It's not the sort of gentleman in the country kind of, which I mean is old, so there's been a lot since then. I'm not saying that, but there's some good stuff I think happening also just structurally. And the other thing, and I'll wrap this up, but I think because it's such a robust and such a long-lived genre at this point, like Wilkie Collins to now, you can play with people's expectations. Kind of this, I was talking with Dan about this today, but the way Game of Thrones plays with fantasy expectations, like if anybody here is a Game of Thrones watcher, the way in which the narrative, you have expectations of the way the narrative is going to go because it's happened that way in so many things that you've read, so that if the author does a reversal or does a switch or kind of drops something out in a different way, it's interesting to you and you have to piece things together differently. I think that's something that the maturation of, I guess, the mystery form makes it really fun, I think, for people to play with too, because there is that really kind of codified sense of what it's supposed to do. Well, thank you all so much, and I'm happy to sign books and chat with you individually. It's really nice to see you all here, so appreciate it, and thank you, Rebecca,
Maria.
and it's really fun to be having a conversation with you, and I appreciate all your questions.
I agree. Thank you.
Right. Drink and eat and drink.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.